Hi, this is Hearthrob, and you're in my studio in Berlin. Today we're going over the title track from the first EP on my label Isnisnt, and the track is called Discount Dancer. I moved to Berlin about 6 years ago. I'd been living in Paris before and needed a change. The record label I've been working with, it's located here, as well as a lot of the artists. And it just made sense to be closer to that. And Berlin itself is just such an easy city to live, especially as an American. As an artist, they're very generous with visas. Beyond just being like a teenager in his bedroom, growing up collecting records and equipment, I was living in New York, and this is about 10, 11 years ago. At that time, I'd been going out, and the techno scene in New York was very small. What was happening in New York, besides some small house nights that had been going on forever, were more of a hard techno, loop-based discotheque nights. Kind of strange for such a big city. And oddly enough, Magda started coming into New York to play from Detroit. And this was before she even started working with Richie Hawtin. So we became friends, and I had been making music, but I wasn't really using a computer. I was just using MPC 2000 and like a DAT recorder, some synths. So it was very raw, kind of crazy stuff. And she and Troy Pierce introduced me to Ableton Live. I think it was maybe the first version then. And that's kind of what broke me into using the computer and going for the, soft synths and whatnot. It was more of a coincidence that also Rich moved to New York for a bit. And that's how that phase of mine has started. So Isnisnt is a record label I've started, and the first release will be out in October. Right now it's just my productions and some collaborations. The idea of starting a label came about after years of working with other people on their own record labels, and in this day and age, it's easy to publish music digitally and to press music if you have a little bit of money. You can still make records for not a lot. Yeah, so that was the impulse, and to have complete control. So the track I'm going to take you through is called Discount Dancer. Sort of a jacking, weird Latin acid disco track in my mind. I rely maybe 50-50 on hardware and software for it. I use a Prophet 08 for one of the main synth lines, a 101 for one of the bass lines, some soft synths from Arturia like the CS80, and then my Eventide for some of the effects, and Machine for the drums. Basically, when I started it, it was just a little jam, and I'd been messing around with the Max for Live MIDI plugins, and figured out that if you send a ton of MIDI notes to a polyphonic synth, you can make some really interesting effects. That was kind of the first element that really got me intrigued in the track. And yeah, it's basically centered around using one MIDI line or a melody that I wrote actually with the Mono Machine. I use it a lot to write melodies because I like the way that it's the sequencer continues to loop. And usually I just export the MIDI file out into Ableton and then edit that and build bass lines and everything from that. Yeah. So it's the elements from that compose the track are variations of the same thing, just put through different synths, and then the actual MIDI notes being affected by Max for Live.
So in this segment, I will go over how I use Max for Live's MIDI effects to get some interesting and sort of playful variations on the main melody, or one of the melodies in the track. So here on track 14, I have a CS80 plugin from Arturia, where at the beginning I have Ableton Live's Midi Effects rack set with 2 channels, one of them with a chord, one with pitch, a bit of note length, and in the second channel, I have the Max for Live MIDI effect Simple Echo, and it's set at -5. So at this point in the track, 121, I'll just solo it and make sure it's all armed. So, and it sounds a bit like this. It's a little chaotic in the beginning, but as it runs through the song, it actually runs smoothly. So the first channel, or chain, once removed, here it's the higher notes. And the bottom are the lower. And together, they're sort of competing a little bit. And since the CS80 is polyphonic, you can get a very full range of tones when used together. And just to sort of indicate what you can do, I'm going to take this up from -5 to +5. And you can sort of hear this building again. So again, it's something you just have to sort of mess around with and experiment. Kind of find your own effects that kind of make it something unique and interesting. At least that's what I do. Now on this other channel, the organ channel, I have another setup using a MIDI effects rack. And on the first chain, again, I have the simple echo happening. And, oops. As you can see, there's some automation happening, and just to speed it up, you can see some unique and kind of strange movements happening. So now I'm going to go over just a bit of how I worked on the sub-bass element of this track. And within the channel, I have a standard Ableton compressor, a Vintage Warmer, and a plugin from Sound Toys called Filter Freak. And with this particular recording, part of it has quite a bit of, I guess it's delay, yeah. A lot of delay just within the recording. So in order to keep the track's overall arrangement from getting too cluttered, I use this particular filter just to kind of go in and out, to take out and make room for some of the other elements. So in the beginning, it goes like this. Now with the kick and the sub happening, you can see the frequency here, it's opening up, and you're getting some of the sub recording. I think it was a 101 stab or something, going through an Eventide delay and echo plugin. And now this other plugin here, Psb Vintage Warmer, something I use quite a bit just to add a little bit of extra thickness. Also, it's quite nice to have a side chain going with the kick, but in this one I didn't do that. Actually mixed it on a different board, whereas this particular instance is just internal for the sake of this demonstration. I think it's always really smart to try to keep as much of the character without making things too cluttered, and obviously this track has a lot going on, so it's very easy for things to get out of hand.